commentator Adam Schwab in Melbourne. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Adam, are you with us?
I am, Janine.
Oh, good to see you after a few weeks. We'll just sum up just from the general market and general news this week. How do we think the week's looking? I'll start with you, Adam. Seems to have recovered a bit. Again, despite the fact there's still a nuclear meltdown happening in Japan, we seem to have dismissed that.
I guess if you're talking market moves that James was talking about, I guess it goes up and down. As you know, Jen, I'm not one to really care about what the market's doing. The market goes up, goes down. Ultimately, most of the market moves are inflating and deflating the market PEs and what the sentiment is. So how you value a company is how much cash it spins off in the long term. Over 10 or 20
I'm with you.
years,
I have no idea how they can be all throwing their hands up one week and then the same problems are still there and it's not so bad. Can you make sense of it, John?
Yes, because brokers make money by putting volume through, and a little bit of volatility helps all of that.
Right, well, let's go to the details that came out today. We saw those retail sales figures, they were okay or better than expected, but the property constructions were shocking. Now, Adam, I know you've been writing about property a lot lately. Just give us an idea what you make of all that.
In terms of the construction numbers, they seem to go up and go down almost every month. There's very little consistency in them. What I think was a really interesting stat to come out was the Financial Review reported, yes, and it was widely reported yesterday, the immigration numbers have drastically dropped certainly in the last year. It was largely a result of much lower migration from students, which was really a John Howard-inspired rort to give away visas to students doing all sorts of courses. That's really dropped away. As a result, what the effect that will have on the property market is yet to be foreseen, but the only rationale that's proffered by most real estate agents, people like Harley Dale of the HIA, Christopher Joy, who's appeared on this channel and a regular sparring partner of mine, regularly point to issues like the housing shortage. But if you look at the number of dwellings being constructed, it's actually, and the number of people 2.6 people per dwelling, it's higher than the levels of immigration and natural population growth due to births over deaths. So the last plank of the housing bulls to sustain this 10-year-long bull market is being really shown to be somewhat fallacious by the immigration numbers.
So are you saying, well, where do you stand on a lot of comment recently about a bubble?
Well, I've been making those comments, Janine. So in terms of a bubble,
I just want to be sure you're still with it.
I'm definitely still with you. The key ingredient of a bubble is where you've got the price of an asset differing from the intrinsic value of that asset. And how you work out intrinsic value is looking at its return on equity or how much cash it spins off. And the average property based on median, so look at the median property price and the median rental, which really is the income of an asset, and you take out all the costs like maintenance and body corporate and depreciation, everything that you have to do with a housing asset, you're looking at about a 2% yield on average. And you put your money in the bank, you get about 6%. So it's not a very good return for an asset that's highly liquid and that's often very leveraged. So a 2% return on any asset would indicate a bubble. It's like a P of 50.
Okay,
which is what we had in the dot-com boom. I
must say, property is a bit to me like shares are to other people on it. I'm going to go to something I mentioned in my rant. We saw this week Colorado involuntary administration follows Angus Robertson and talking about, you know, people out of work, terrible. As I said, the great private equity gurus, the chickens are coming home to roost, aren't they?
Well, there's a few companies that in different stages of the cycle which shows you exactly how it works. So Myer was a retail company with a lot of debt, but they managed to get the timing right and got it back onto the market.
Yeah, but
and walked away with
shareholders got free.
Yeah, that's right. But the private equity guys walked away with $1 billion. Harris Scarf of press round today say they're going to bring their retail group back to the market. At the same time, Colorado collapsed. Colorado got it wrong. There's not that much about improving the underlying business with these blokes. It's much more about meeting the market and running the cycle and controlling the debt. The Red Group, their private equity guys actually bought the debt back from the bank, then put it into liquidation. The scuttlebutt is that they're using the corporate law protections to do a restructure and get out of leases and clean up some of their employees in the process.
Now, while we're in some controversial areas today, there's a bit of a story about Tony D'Alessio, the outgoing ASIC chief. Now, I know this is a subject close to your heart, Adam. We saw this week that an interview with him in The Australian, where a rather bizarre interview, I thought, one of those things where they just seem to turn the tape on and let them talk, where he said, you know, oh, it's really tough for non-executive directors out there. And I kept thinking to myself, is this our corporate watchdog who's been maligned for being weak actually saying these things? What did you think?
Oh, 100% agree, Janine. ASIC is often accused of going a bit easy, accused by people like myself of going a bit easy on directors and executives who oversaw some massive corporate collapses. I wrote a book on it. If you look at companies like Allco, one of the biggest fiascos ever seen, Babcock and Brown, MFS, not one criminal charge laid against any of the executives or directors. MFS, there's some civil charges that's been laid. Eddie Groves is the only person to have been charged, and he was charged over a $3 million
And I had Travis Sykes on earlier this week going over their shortcomings, but I'm really doing this to get to an interesting story in the Sydney Morning Herald today, which came 2 days after that other interview. I wondered, did Tony D'Alessio know this was coming? How the corporate watchdog bought his slice of paradise. Basically, it tells how Mr. D'Alessio bought a Yarra Valley winery from a distressed public company 7 months after his appointment as chairman of the ASIC, and then details of the purchase were granted a special exemption so they weren't made public. Now, what did you make of this story?
I thought it was a phenomenally good story by Michael West and Scott Roachford of the
and
Sydney
Ian
Morning Herald for a
Ian
start.
Berender, also one of our guests on the show. Yes.
But what a great story and a great yarn. But if what was said was true, and you have to think that it is, it would almost make D'Alessio's position untenable.
Well, he's stepping down anyway, so what does it matter?
But he's not stepping down. He's not stepping down now. So it's very much, you may recall Harvey Pitt, who was the chairman of the SEC, the US version of ASIC. He was appointed, he was similar background to D'Alessio. D'Alessio used to work for Mallisons and directed the ASIC, so very much from the corporate end of town. Harvey Pitt was a lobbyist for the accountancy firms and got some very lax accounting standards passed. Both came from corporate backgrounds. Harvey Pitt was forced to resign after a controversy with appointing William Webster to an accounting body. He didn't disclose things. There was a conflict of interest there. It could be history, deja vu all over again, like Yogi Berra with D'Alessio here, and combined with sort of the lack of vigilance and lack of prosecution of some directors that you'd think should have been prosecuted.
I know, it's not good for his legacy. Now, John Stewart, what I found amazing about this was on the Business Spectator website about this story today, just above it was the Deputy Chairman of the ASIC yesterday put out a stern warning to companies that directors should be more open in their disclosure of related party transactions.
That's right. And
how can you have her arguing that when this story appears today?
That's right. What it underlines, though, is a lack of culture in Australian business and our ability to move from the public to the private sphere, where Adam alluded to the US, where they do it much more easily, they do it more openly, and they're expected to disclose all of their connections or put them into blind trusts as they do it.
Well, Graham Samuel put his stuff into a blind trust, a great personal cost to himself. What I don't like about this is the cover-up, the apparent this was very rare to not disclose the details.
You can't hold the principal policeman's role in corporate Australia and have anything look at all out of the ordinary. And at the very least, that's what this looks like. And as for his deputy wagging her finger at everybody else at the same time, well, that's just, you know, adding fuel to the fire.
Would you agree with that, Adam? It looked a bit hypocritical this morning.
100%. It was, it's just outrageous. If this is true and ASIC's been granting exemptions to companies involved with its chairman, and then whilst I think that the story referred to that D'Alessio wasn't involved, well, if someone who reports to him is involved, he might as well be involved. So it's like the CEO.